The girl, a quiet and reserved figure, enters Northwood High School in Riverton. She has come to finish her senior year of high school and go unnoticed. But before she even completes the first week, a blonde girl in her class decides that she is the perfect target. The laughter begins, first discreetly, then whispers until public humiliation. And when the bully smiles, convinced that it is time for the final blow, the crowd gathers, waiting for the inevitable. But they don't know one thing about the black girl. She's not just the new kid, she's a trained combat fighter, and she's about to remind them exactly what that means. The yellow school bus pulls up in front of Northwood High. Brakes screech as the doors creak open. Students pour out, laughing, jostling, moving in groups that have been forming for ages. No one pays attention to the girl who gets off last, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression unreadable. Mariana Carter adjusted the strap of her backpack and took a deep breath, taking in the imposing brick building in front of her. It wasn't much different from her old school in Savannah. The same crowded hallways, the same loud students, the same unspoken rules of survival. Keep your head down, keep a low profile, and stay out of trouble. That had been her strategy at every school before, and she intended to stick to that plan. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to finish her senior year, get her diploma, and move on. When she walked into school, she felt the familiar sensation, stares fixed on her, whispers exchanged in hushed tones. She knew how it worked. A new face always drew curiosity. But the scrutiny was different when you were a black girl in a predominantly white school. They weren't just looking at her, they were sizing her up. What kind of person was she? Was she loud, aggressive? Was she one of those? Mariana ignored them, keeping her gaze straight ahead as she walked down the hallway looking for her locker. That's when she saw them. Brittany Clark. The name had been whispered around her on the bus, the way the students looked at the tall blonde girl with a mixture of admiration and wariness. She wasn't just popular, she was in control. The kind of girl who dictated the social hierarchy, deciding who mattered and who didn't. And she never walked alone. At her side were Chloe and Emily, her loyal shadows. But what really caught Mariana's attention were the two boys with them. Ryan Clark, Brittany's older brother, a senior and star on the school football team, broad-shouldered and with a cocky grin that said he knew he was untouchable. Next to him was Dylan Hayes, a skinny boy with sharp eyes and an easy smile. The kind of guy who talked a lot just because he liked the sound of his own voice. Mariana knew the type. She had no intention of getting involved with either of them, so she turned back to her locker, turning the dial on the lock. But even with her head down, she could feel Brittany's gaze lingering on her, calculating. First period passed without incident, though the whispers continued. Someone nudged her in the hallway, muttering, "She's from Savannah. Maybe she's one of those feisty ones." Mariana didn't react. Let them think what they wanted. At lunch, she found an empty table in the corner of the cafeteria and sat alone, eating in silence. The murmur of conversation and laughter filled the air, but she didn't engage, didn't even look up, until the laughter changed. It was louder now, higher pitched, more directed. She felt it before she heard it. Well, look at that." Brittany's voice was soft and full of sarcasm. Mariana didn't react, calmly taking a sip of her juice. "Is the new girl shy?" Chloe asked. "I think she's stuck up," Emily added, thinking too much of herself to talk to us. The cafeteria was listening now. The show had started. Mariana continued eating, not giving them anything. Then a new voice joined in. "Dylan, maybe she doesn't speak English?" He scoffed, grinning. Laughter spread around them. Ryan leaned against the table next to hers, looming over her. "Or maybe," he drawled, "she's just slow." More laughter. Brittany smiled, watching Mariana closely. She wanted a reaction, needed one. Because if the new girl just ignored them, that was a problem. If you ignored Brittany Clark, that meant you weren't afraid of her. She reached out and flicked Mariana's juice glass, knocking it over onto the tray. The juice sloshed across the table, soaking into the food. The cafeteria was silent for a moment. Mariana exhaled slowly, put down her fork, wiped her hand with a napkin, and calmly stood up. Without sparing Brittany or her group a glance, she picked up the tray, walked over to the trash can, and tossed it inside without saying a word. Then she laughed. Behind her, the laughter erupted again, but it wasn't as loud this time. It was forced, uncomfortable, and Brittany felt it too, because when Mariana looked at her, before she left, there was something in her eyes, something cold. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear, just a quiet, dangerous patience. And for the first time in a long time, Brittany Clark felt something she wasn't used to: uncertainty. The tension in the cafeteria lingered long after Mariana left, spreading through the school like wildfire. By the next class, people were already whispering about it in the hallways, recounting the moment when she'd simply walked away, untouched, unshaken. It should have been a victory for Brittany, yet another new girl, humiliated and submissive. But something about the way Mariana had handled the situation didn't add up. She didn't seem embarrassed or even angry. It was almost as if she had been expecting this to happen. Brittany hated that feeling, the feeling of not being in control. Sitting in her next class, she drummed her manicured nails against the desk, barely paying attention as the teacher spoke. Beside her, Chloe leaned in and whispered, "That was kind of weird, wasn't it?" Brittany's eyes flicked to her. "Weird how?" Chloe hesitated. She didn't react. Most people, especially newbies, are at least angry or scared or something. She just didn't care. "She's faking it," Brittany said, forcing a smile. "She wants to look tough." Chloe nodded, but Brittany could see the uncertainty in her expression. She wasn't the only one who thought so. The entire cafeteria had sensed it, and now, instead of laughing at how pathetic the newbie was, people were curious about her. Brittany's jaw clenched. That wasn't how things worked. Across the room, 2 desks down, Ryan stretched his arms behind his head, flashing a lazy smile. "You look stressed, sis." Brittany shot him a pointed look. "Shut up, Ryan." Ryan chuckled in amusement. "Relax, if she wants to be a tough girl, we just need to push her harder. She'll break." Dylan, who was lounging behind them, smirked. "Yeah, maybe we need to heat things up a little." Brittany let their words sink in. Maybe they were right. Mariana was just another girl trying to be tough, and if she thought she could walk around like she was untouchable, she was in for a surprise. The next day, the pressure began to mount. Mariana could feel it before she even got to school. The way people looked at her differently now, how the energy had shifted. She wasn't just the new kid anymore. She was a challenge. She didn't fight back. She didn't need to. Walking to her locker that morning, she moved, with the same calm nonchalance as always. But that didn't stop the whispers. Did she really just walk away? She didn't even look angry. What if she's really dangerous? Rumors spread faster than wildfire, and it wasn't long before Brittany and her group decided to test her again. It started small. During gym class, Chloe and Emily made sure to accidentally bump into her whenever they walked by, an elbow here, a careless shove there. Mariana didn't react. This only encouraged them. During basketball, Ryan made sure to take the ball away from her every time she reached for it, shoving her hard enough to make her trip. Dylan laughed every time this happened. "Damn newbie, do you know how to play?" Mariana ignored them. Brittany watched with her arms crossed, waiting, wanting to see something in Mariana snap. But nothing. Mariana took every shove, every insult, every unfair move, and didn't flinch. She even looked bored. It wasn't submission, it was control. Brittany gritted her teeth. This was worse. By lunchtime, Brittany had had enough of games. Mariana had barely picked up her tray when she felt a sudden hard shove from behind. She stumbled forward, her tray falling over, food spilling across the floor. The entire cafeteria went silent for a moment. There was nothing but the echo of her tray hitting the floor. Then the laughter started. Brittany's smile widened as she walked over, standing over Mariana as if she were already victorious. "Oh no," she said mockingly. The poor newbie dropped her lunch. How sad. Chloe and Emily laughed. Ryan leaned against a nearby table, arms crossed, a smile on his face. Dylan had his phone out recording. The students pulled out their own phones, cameras flashing. This was it, the moment Mariana was supposed to break. Brittany leaned in. What's wrong? Are you going to cry? Maybe you should run home to Mommy. More laughter, more cameras. But Mariana didn't move. She stood completely still for a second, her fists clenched. At her sides, her breathing steady. Then slowly, she looked up at Brittany and smiled. It was small, almost imperceptible, but Brittany saw it. For the first time, Brittany felt something cold crawl up her spine. The cafeteria was still laughing, but Brittany suddenly wasn't sure why. It didn't feel like she was winning anymore. Mariana calmly reached down, picked up her tray, and without looking away, turned and walked away. The laughter erupted again, but it wasn't the same this time. Brittany could hear the confusion underneath, the way people whispered even as they laughed. It wasn't fear in Mariana's eyes, it wasn't anger, it was something else. And for the first time in her life, Brittany Clark felt doubt. That night, Mariana sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched plate of food in front of her. Her father, Marcus Carter, stood at the counter, pouring himself a cup of coffee, his eyes darting back to her every now and then. He didn't need to ask if something was wrong. He'd seen that expression before, the calm, measured stillness of someone holding something in. He set the cup down, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "Tell me." Mariana exhaled through her nose, the scene from the cafeteria still replaying in her head, the food dripping off the tray, the laughter, the smug look on Brittany's face. "I don't want a fight," she finally said. Marcus studied her for a long moment before speaking. "And yet, you're thinking about it." Mariana's fingers curled into fists on the table. "I don't want a fight," she repeated, her voice tighter this time. "But I also don't want to be that girl, the one who just accepts it. They think they can walk all over me. I walked away today, and I swear it made things worse." Marcus took a slow sip of coffee, considering her words carefully. "You walked away because you didn't want to hurt them." Mariana looked up sharply. He met her gaze without blinking. "I trained you to defend yourself, not to be a weapon. But I also trained you to recognize when people like that won't stop until you give them a reason." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She knew that truth all too well. She had grown up in a fighting academy, surrounded by men and women who lived for discipline, for control. Her father had been a professional wrestler before he left the ring to train others. She'd been fighting grown men since she was 8. Her footwork, her instincts, her ability to anticipate an opponent's next move. It had all been ingrained in her since childhood. But that power had consequences. The last time she'd fought back, really fought back, a boy had ended up in the hospital. It had ruined her life, a new school, a new town, a promise to herself that she would never let that side of her out again. She took a deep breath. "If I fight back, it won't end there," she murmured. "It never does," Marcus agreed. "That's true. But walking away doesn't always end it either. If they think you're weak, they'll keep pushing until they break you." She met his gaze, her voice lower now. "So, what do I do?" Marcus set down his cup and walked over to her, pulling out the chair across from hers. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, his tone calm but firm. "You don't start fights, Mariana, but you do finish them." She held his gaze. "You don't have to prove anything to them, but if they don't give you a choice, you make sure they never try again." She exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing a little. Marcus sat back. "I know you. I know your control. You're not some out-of-control girl throwing punches because she's angry. You make decisions. You calculate." A pause. Then he added, "So if you have to fight, don't do it to teach them a lesson." He met her gaze again, steady, unwavering. Do it to end the fight before it even starts." Mariana stood there, absorbing his words, letting them sink into her bones. She hadn't been looking for a fight, but she knew now that the fight was looking for her, and when it came, she would be ready. Brittany Clark couldn't sleep that night. She replayed the scene in the cafeteria in her head over and over, but no matter how hard she tried to distort it, she couldn't ignore what had happened. Mariana had smiled. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't cowered. She hadn't even looked angry. She just smiled. It wasn't right. It wasn't normal. And it wasn't over. Lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling, Brittany clenched her fists. People had laughed, yes, but something was different about the way they talked about it afterward. The whispers in the hallways had changed. People weren't making fun of the new girl anymore. They were talking about her. Some of them even seemed impressed. Brittany's stomach twisted at the thought. No, she wasn't going to let some random transfer, a nobody, mess up the order of things. Tomorrow, she would put an end to this once and for all. By the time morning came, the plan was set. Ryan, Dylan, Chloe, Emily. Everyone was on board. It wasn't just about proving a point anymore. It was about making sure Mariana knew her place. The moment the final bell rang, Brittany made sure word spread quickly. At lunchtime, everyone knew, after school, behind the gym, no teachers, no cameras, just a lesson in humility. Mariana knew too. She had felt the change the moment she walked into the building, the way people looked at her differently. Now, some with curiosity, some with amusement, some with pity. She wasn't stupid. She'd been through this before. Different faces, different schools, the same standards. She'd spent years avoiding these moments, staying quiet, keeping her head down, making sure she never had to be that person again. But people like Brittany never understood silence. They thought it meant weakness, and Mariana was tired of pretending. When the final bell rang, she didn't hesitate. She walked toward the back of the school, into the open lot behind the gym, where cracked asphalt stretched out under the darkening sky. They were already waiting. Brittany stood in the center, arms crossed, expression smug. Chloe and Emily flanked her as usual. But this time, Ryan and Dylan were there too, a little closer than necessary, their presence an unspoken warning. And behind them, an audience. The news had spread faster than Brittany had expected. At least 20 students gathered in a loose circle, some whispering, others holding their phones, waiting for the show to start. Mariana didn't react. She kept walking, slow, steady, controlled, stopping a few feet away from Brittany. Brittany tilted her head. "Wow, you actually showed up. I thought you'd keep running like yesterday." Mariana didn't blink. "I wasn't running." Brittany scoffed. "Please, you didn't even try to defend yourself." Mariana exhaled, tilting her head slightly as if she were bored. "Do you think throwing food at someone is fighting?" Brittany's smile faltered. She hated how calm Mariana sounded. "Oh, don't worry," she said sweetly. "I intend to make this real." She took a step forward, and Mariana finally spoke the words that made the air stop. "I'm here to warn you." Brittany blinked, taken aback. "Warn me?" Ryan and Dylan exchanged glances. Chloe and Emily looked confused. Mariana's voice was firm even, as if she were stating a fact. "You don't want to do this." Brittany laughed, but there was a tremor of something sharp and uncertain in her expression. "Oh, how adorable. The new girl is threatening me." Mariana didn't move. "It's not a threat. It's a warning." Brittany hated feeling her own heart beat a little faster. Hated that Mariana wasn't afraid. Hated that she was starting to feel like she was the one making a mistake. Ryan, sensing the tension, stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Are you done talking, or are we going to start this?" And just like that, Brittany had a way. A way to save face. If Mariana wasn't afraid of her, fine, she'd let Ryan handle this. Brittany smiled. "Did you hear that, Ryan? She says we don't want to do this. So why don't you show her how wrong she is?" Ryan rolled his shoulders, moving closer to Mariana. He was at least 6 inches taller than her, built like a wall, smiling like this was all a joke. "I'll go easy on you," he said mockingly. Mariana didn't respond. Ryan struck first. It happened in an instant. The moment his fist moved, Mariana was gone. She stepped into his reach, grabbed his wrist with one hand, and in one fluid motion twisted and used his own momentum against him. Ryan's world turned upside down. 1 second he was throwing a punch, the next his back slammed into the asphalt with such force that the air was knocked from his lungs. The crowd gasped. Brittany's stomach dropped. Ryan lay on the ground, coughing, his eyes wide with confusion, with fear, because this wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't possible. Mariana stepped back, her face expressionless. "I told you so." Dylan hesitated, his bravado wavering, his body tense. But he had a reputation to uphold. He couldn't back down, not in front of everyone. "She got lucky," he spat, stepping forward. Mariana barely moved. She dodged at the last second. One smooth movement, grabbed Dylan's wrist mid-swing, spun behind him, and twisted his arm behind his back in a lock so fast he let out a strangled cry. She let go. Dylan staggered forward, clutching his arm, looking at her as if she was something else. The crowd was silent now. Brittany felt the pulse pounding in her skull. She had lost control. Mariana stood there, hands loose at her sides, completely calm. And when she finally looked at Brittany again, her voice was low, almost disappointed. "Do you still think I was running?" Brittany didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in her life, she knew what it was like to be the prey. For the first time in her life, Brittany Clark had nothing to say. The silence was deafening. The same crowd that had gathered to watch Mariana be humiliated was now frozen, staring, their wide-eyed shock reflected back at Brittany like a distorted mirror. Ryan was still on the ground, struggling to catch his breath, his pride shattered in front of everyone. Dylan stood rigid, his arms still clutched to his chest, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like he was physically trying to contain his humiliation. Chloe and Emily, Brittany's faithful shadows, were eerily quiet, the usual smiles wiped from their faces. And Mariana? She hadn't moved, she hadn't cheered, she hadn't mocked them, she hadn't even looked pleased. She just stood there, steady, her hands still calmly at her sides, as if none of this had taken any real effort. Brittany's nails dug into her palms. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Her mind raced, scrambling for a way to fix this, to turn things around. There had to be something, some way, to regain control, to remind everyone that she was still Brittany Clark, still the one who made the rules at this school, still the one people feared. But then Mariana spoke, and she made sure Brittany understood exactly how badly she had lost. "Did you think this was about power?" Mariana said, her voice quiet, but somehow louder than all the murmurs around them. "But the truth is, you were never strong in the first place." Brittany felt the words hit like a slap, burning her skin, her pride, her very existence. And then Mariana turned around. Just like that. She turned around, leaving Brittany standing there, humiliated in front of the same crowd that had once adored her. A move so simple, so dismissive, that Brittany snapped. She didn't think, didn't plan, just acted, reaching out, grabbing Mariana's hair in a blind, desperate attempt to regain control. A mistake. Before Brittany could even register what had happened, her wrist was caught in midair, caught in a grip that was like iron. Mariana didn't even turn her head. She just held Brittany's arm there, effortless, her body completely still. Brittany froze, her breath catching in her throat. And then finally, Mariana turned to look at her. Brittany felt the full weight of that gaze. Steady, unwavering, inescapable. Mariana's grip tightened slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to make Brittany feel her own weakness. Mariana leaned in close enough that only Brittany could hear her speak. "You have no power over me," she said, "and you never will." And then she let go. Brittany staggered back, her heart slamming against her ribs, her body betrayed there in front of everyone. Mariana didn't wait for an answer. She just stepped away. This time, the silence wasn't just shock, it was final. Brittany knew it, and worse, everyone else knew it too. Ryan and Dylan weren't smiling anymore. Chloe and Emily weren't whispering in her ear. The crowd, the same people who had hung on her every word before, were looking at her differently now, not with fear, but with pity. Brittany couldn't breathe. She had lost, not just a fight, she had lost everything. The next morning, Northwood High looked different. Brittany Clark walked through the halls, shoulders squared, chin lifted, her designer purse slung over her shoulder as if nothing had changed. But she could feel the change, the weight pressing down on her, the whispers that followed her wherever she went. She had spent years running this school, controlling the social order, dictating who was important and who was invisible. But now she was the one being watched. Not with admiration, not with fear, with doubt, and worst of all, with curiosity. It was Mariana's name she heard whispered behind her as she passed, not her own. People weren't talking about Brittany's power anymore. They were talking about how the new girl had dismantled it in less than a week. At her usual table in the cafeteria, Brittany sat stiffly, barely touching her food. Chloe and Emily were quieter than usual, avoiding eye contact, their loyalties suddenly uncertain. Ryan and Dylan sat nearby, their bruised egos still fresh, but neither of them had anything to say. No one had, because for once, Brittany wasn't the center of attention. Across the cafeteria, Mariana sat alone as before. She ate her lunch calmly, unfazed, as if nothing had happened. But something had. People kept casting furtive glances in her direction. Some students whispered, others just watched, hesitating near her table, as if they were considering sitting with her. Some of the basketball team waved respectfully as they passed. Even some of the girls who would never have recognized her before now looked intrigued. But Mariana, she didn't care. She wasn't looking for attention, wasn't trying to replace Brittany. She'd done what she came to do, and now it was over. Brittany hated this more than anything, that Mariana hadn't just beaten her, she'd outdone her with no victory lap. No bragging rights, no desire to take Brittany's place at the top, because to Mariana, the throne had never mattered. Brittany's fingers curled around her fork. She could fix this. She'd fixed worse things before. Maybe if she got ahead of the narrative, maybe if she made Mariana look bad, maybe a shadow fell across her table. Brittany looked up. Mariana was there. For a second, Brittany forgot how to breathe. Mariana didn't sit down, didn't lower her voice, just stared at Brittany, completely calm, completely in control. "It's over," she said simply. Brittany's throat tightened. Everyone was listening. She could feel dozens of eyes on them, waiting, watching, holding their breath. The words sounded like a sentence, a final verdict. Brittany had lost, and everyone knew it. Mariana didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked away. Brittany sat there, frozen, her world crumbling around her as Mariana walked through the cafeteria doors and out into the hallway, leaving everything behind. And for the first time in her entire life, Brittany Clark had no control over anything. Join us in sharing meaningful stories by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.